I do want to start because I have to, and it's close to me. I would just there'd been a lot of real terrible shit happening in the U.S. the last couple days. It's been a thing that has drastically affected me, obviously for personal reasons, and I'm sure I'm not alone here in feeling a lot of that. And I just wanted to take a moment and just say that there is wherever you land on anything politically, because it doesn't even matter, there's a great need for us to act and to get involved in our local areas, our schools, politics, wherever you may sit and however you may be. And if you are 20-something, 30-something, if you're a parent, if you're just getting up there, or if you're a teenager, being involved actually goes a great deal towards avoiding having tragedies happen. And I know because I've been watching it happen over and over. And it's a standard rule. The less involved a community is in different things, the more apt these things are to happen. So get involved, take care of each other, very much. One of the great challenges when you're talking about immortality, and we are, from the beginning, my project has been about, since the first day I pitched it and the first idea has been about talking through what it means really to live forever. We don't have this feeling we may believe, some of us believe we do, but there hasn't been a lot of exploration even into what it means to just have an eternal life. The idea that people who have one of those would even keep a diary, I think is a bit silly, how meaningless a lot of just general activities are. And, we wanted to have a voice that exists to sort of be the audience, looking through things and how one of us from a world of mortality may react to the things that are seen and are. Whether or not they're immortal too, I think is something that remains to be seen and remains to be shared. But I think there's a lot of room for us to play with what it means to be in this space and what it means to see these things and react to them and have a voice that's able to do that.
And I like that, the kind of go-between or the go back and forth.
Yeah, we needed someone to document it the same way that the original script for Star Wars, R2-D2 is actually, it's the story of R2-D2, and he's the writer of Star Wars. A lot of people don't think about these things. You need a narrator. You need someone to talk through it. And for us, it came very naturally to talk about someone who was traveling through. What would they see? What would it be like if this is the thing you just came across? And it helps us explain to everyone else who's here a world that is truly foreign despite being incredibly familiar. So there's like 9 things that you're actually asking there. So let's start with the first one, which is one I keep having to harp on quite a bit. The first thing is we are not building a Second Life metaverse. We are not currently doing that. If you haven't looked at my Twitter, I've recently did a rant about what metaverse means and how there is actually no way you can build a metaverse. What you need to do is build many universes, and that people who go between them make the metaverse through their actions. They themselves are the metaverse. Inside of our space, and when we build our version of the city, there isn't going to be a Grand Theft Auto character walking around. We're not going to force you, as I like to say, we're not going to force you to walk down 900 alleys to walk from a shitty apartment all the way downtown to go to a game when, it's the digital world. We don't have to do anything like that. We can transport you as if time and space is irrelevant. So we're not necessarily doing that. It's not saying that no one can, and it's not saying that this never will exist. The way we're currently building the city is effectively an isometric overhead SimCity style view that will give you views into things. Think of it as SimCity with a bit of Animal Crossing, maybe Simsy in there, but not necessarily controlling a character and walking around and doing that. Your avatar, and not just your avatar, but in general, everything is going to be affected by your aspect. As you've seen the 9, you will soon be seeing the 81. You will start seeing in trailers and others that we built something very unique here. 2 years ago, I came up with this thesis around this idea of the meta object. And there was this idea of how do you actually build something that can go into lots of different projects? One of the pipe dreams of NFTs, and it is absolutely a pipe dream, is this idea that I buy an ape and that picture or that JPEG or even a model suddenly allows me to go in between game universes, and I can take my avatar with me, and lo and behold, it works everywhere else. This, maybe someday, we are a long ways away from that for a lot of pretty significant technical reasons that people are taking on as challenges. But one of the biggest in my minds is, how do you allow someone to create an interesting universe and then add Luke Skywalker from Star Wars? Which one? Well, I want to do the ones from Master Terakazi, not necessarily this other one. Or I want to do Avatar. Well, which Avatar? Is it the one from the Ubisoft game? Or is it the one from the film? Or is it the one from the 2D cartoon? All of these things are art directions. They're standards. They affect the gameplay. They affect the movement. And if I'm just allowed to bring anything anywhere, it suddenly flattens what actually I'm able to do. I can't carve a unique artistic experience. The same way that if you were to have a hyper-realistic actor show up in, say, Into the Spider-Verse, it would have ruined that movie. The movie is about style, and that's actually what drives it forward. The art direction is important. On top of all the other artistic challenges, the design challenges are massive. So how do we build something that allows you to have always going through everything and have that ability? Well, the art team sat down, we started working through what's called procedural art development. What it means is everything you're seeing is somewhat handcrafted. And when I say somewhat, it's all technically very handcrafted by some of the most exceptional artists I've ever been fortunate to work with. But it's not that they literally made the first aspect when we released the artist and you see it there. No one carved that or set it up or organized it in the way that it is. Instead, someone spent time building the parts, the algorithm, the setup that puts it in the position it's in, with the colors, with the little masks, the story characters, the beats that allow us to really have all of these characters unique. And then every single time it shows up, or we meant another one, it's completely different. The seed is very much opposite. The joke was, for us, it was actually very difficult for us to pick a single seed and then use that to actually do a trailer, because it meant we had to render, and if it fucked up, that was the end. We'd have to start over and like try to find another seed or pray to God we could find it. There's just a lot of randomness. The pieces are 100% generative. And so because of that, it lets us do some really cool stuff. And one of those big ones is, let's say you own, at some point, you're playing the game, you own an aspect that is a combination of the warrior and the architect, for example. Your avatar will take on traits from both, because those elements and those assets are fungible and able to be put inside of anything. They have general code that allows us to go, oh, it's these colors. So if a game only wants colors, let's say you're all cubes, it doesn't force someone to be, this is the human one. It's like, oh, let everyone be cubes, but this one's white with a little bit of red and a little bit of flesh tone, but also these other accoutrements that get to fall off of it. This lets us have that I get to go anywhere and carry my piece of my soul with me. But conversely, it lets us also change all of your future NFTs, because as you have land and as you build a building, or you have one of our antiquities or other items in the space, those things take on these looks and feel. The current NFTs are based around a very particular shape, and you'll notice it's spherical. But that isn't necessarily the case. If we have buildings, if we have signposts, if we have vases, if we have masks, if we have humanoids, that's it. It just swaps out and goes the next thing, and off you go with literally the same mix and the overall setup. And it lets us have this generative art that can be instantiated by art directors inside of their games without us dictating, ha 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 ha, I've got some weird art and now I'm going to stand out in your world. It's, if anyone's been in VR chat, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where half of everyone is like Catboy anime characters, and then Knuckles and Sonic in full 3D next to you that aren't cel shaded. The incongruities get difficult. So this setup, and as we move, is a big deal, I think, for us to have you be able to move anywhere on the platform, have people be able to recognize it, so you look generally Brooksish, or what people have gotten to know Brooksish, as I move from game to game to game, and all my shit gets to look like me too. And this kind of gives us room to sort of have that growth and be able to be forward thinking, rather than locking everyone into whatever weird look and feel we happen to decide now works, but 3 years from now someone comes up with something better, right in. I will say, Fred, who's been leading art on this charge alongside Chris, who's been also working with Fred on the technical aspects and also the art, just beyond talented people that I've been fortunate to have worked with in the past, and who I'm fortunate decided to join me on this journey. And it's yielded, as you'll see, when we start getting beyond just even two of the aspects mixed together looks gorgeous. But 3 or more starts becoming, I think, stunning. Some of them are breathtaking, the way that they combine, and it becomes an intuitive way of looking at it, rather than looking at it going, oh, I'm 1/4 this, 1/4 that. Instead, there's kind of a feeling of, sure, you can look at the stats and know exactly, but there's a feeling of it that becomes quickly intuitive visually that I just adore. So the 81 is made up effectively of one of each of there's 2 different parts. So let's say it's a mix of, the first and the 9th, or the second and the 7th. Each successive generation grows in that. So the next generation may be 3 of them, the one after maybe 4, and you start having sort of a more randomized mix, especially as we get to the larger numbers. This will continue on into the successive generations, and that includes all of our NFTs. The other really nice thing about generative art, one of the challenges we needed to overcome is, since every player is going to have an NFT, and we're going to have an ass load of people who have aspects, like we're not going to have like 5,000. We're going to have a lot of these at some point or another, and maybe even more. The ability for us to have a lot of art becomes problematic. A lot of current crypto projects are running into this, where they basically end up having to outsource the art to 5 or 6 farms in India or Southeast Asia to try to churn out as much as possible. And I don't like that. We don't like doing that. This gives us the ability to just hit, okay, cool, render more players as more players come in, and every single one of them is wholly unique, and kind of gives that randomized oddness. Secondarily, we have those little edges, the little bits of extra rarity, and you'll see some of them. I'm going to do my best maybe to avoid going over most of those right now. I may yell at Chris to come up here and actually say those in a moment. But for the most part, we have a lot of extra things that are going to start showing up a little bit more wildly, a little bit more commonly, especially amongst the outer rings, that give some of that edge of specialness, and also some pretty significant functionality boosts as we build those in. Is that a fair way? Chris, I know you're in the room. I know you can hear me.
I think that's more than a fair way to explain it. Yes.
Yes. And so will the 729, and so will, and so will, and so will, all the way through the inner circle. The 9 aren't just playing roles within the economy. The 9 are the silos. Each one, and we will in time reveal what they are, but each one is touching directly one of the major components. My running thing, and I've said this in previous AMA, and I've talked about this a few times on Twitter and podcasts, what we're doing really is we just basically just abstracted sports. We just looked at sports and broke it down into the different functions of actually how they make money, where people find power, where people find emotion, and we just broke them, and it turned out there's 9 places for it. And all we're doing is effectively tokenizing that, making it abstracted to the point where we're able to build the utility into tokens, utilize NFTs and smart contracts in order to harden that and keep it very controlled and tight. And so these 9 silos that exist within it, for example, an easy one I can say that maybe you should be able to guess, the performer doesn't manage battles. Performer manages performances, broadcast rights, streaming, those types of events. Now, that functionality is something that the performer will be the one who handles. And those who have aspects that give affinity to the performer, if you have the performer in yours, they will get special secondary abilities there. They will get bonuses. They will have an encouraged reason to take part in those things. Conversely, players who don't have the performer but are doing a great deal of broadcast will be deeply encouraged to also make their way over and actually find more performer-centric aspects. But again, this is very much dependent on how you intend to play in our space. I myself, for example, I will be doing a lot of the patronage stuff and probably streaming. I really like that stuff a lot. but I think I'll be doing a few less of a couple of the other things. I'm not big into the sort of meta economy shit, has never been my bag. So for me, the ability for me to aim right at, say, the warrior, who handles some of that, and the performer, and find those kinds of combinations, that fits my general play style. Others are more diverse or less diverse in various ways, and so you can find your aspect that truly matches how you play in it, and find out actually who the person who has that affinity is, who's the most powerful and strongest. It's a way for us to have a multidimensional leaderboard of sorts on top of all of the rest.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah. And it's all of these are just, again, they're just NFTs. So the ability for you to, because we're not talking about players, we're talking about the aspects. This is all inner circle, economy, metagamers. But I'm going to be using the term metagamers throughout this, not players, because this is where metagamers live, is the economics, the space between. And our ability to sort of have all of these aspects, you can switch anytime. Now, you can't just turn one into another. They are non-fungible. You have to go find them. You have to go get them. You have to chase them around a little bit. You have to buy them, sell yours, make them valuable. This play, again, it's very big about how the economics of it grows and how your membership pass specifically affects what you do and the utility you bring within all of it. Okay, let's talk through the two sides. Nothing at all will affect gameplay ever in anything. Ever. 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 So that hopefully answers any time anyone may ask that in general. And when I say gameplay, though, I want to be very careful. We are talking about players. We're talking about the people who, the difference between a controller, a mouse and keyboard, shooting people, running after people, playing the strategy games. The players. Nothing, period, will ever affect that ever, 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 ever. Now, inside the economy, inside the metagame, it absolutely will affect it. Think of it the same way that if we were to release an RPG and we did a D&D type thing with an elven rogue and a human wizard, those are not the same people. Those aren't the same type of people that play them. Those aren't the same types of gameplay, even though it's the same game. That's what we're doing in the economy. Each one of the 9, think of them as classes. Think of the aspects as multi-classing. That's the difference. In the metagame, which is one gigantic metagame, all across all of the titles, there's one giant shared economy. In that, your aspect determines a great deal. And it's as if you were picking a class inside of any of the games that we play. But I could have one of the 81. I could go in as one of the 9, which I might do on occasion because I think it'd be fun to murder people as one of the 9, or even in the non-death ones, I think it'd be fun to play. The ability to go in, but it doesn't matter who. Anyone goes in, they're all on a level playing field. Skill comes first, period. Across the board, that's it. Full stop. There's no way to buy anything that changes that. So just, there you go. Just saying. Like that's hopefully that answers it. It's a very hard line, so it's pretty crisp to say. But inside the metagame, this is what we're doing. We're building you guys character classes. That's what it is. Like that's what they are. They're character classes in the metagame. All the other little games, all the other little magic circles that are around it, or even within it and sort of around, they don't have anything that's affected by this. It's your skill. It's how you play. It's what you're doing with your friends. The metagame, we're building character classes. We call them aspects. And there's a lot of different sort of variability in there. That's a deep question. Well, I'd be lying if I didn't immediately go right to Gilles Deleuze and the philosophers around him. The way economics works, I think, has always been fascinating to me, specifically in the way that theory has handled it. A lot of people who don't necessarily read, like, let's say even Karl Marx, who I would probably put into this, I would put a lot of hardline capitalists too. My understanding of things kind of comes from all of them. One of the interesting things that people don't really get from Karl Marx's Das Kapital is that Marx isn't even necessarily anti-capital. It's more anti-capitalism, the system. But here's how capital works. And he kind of lays it out. And as he did that, and as other writers sort of took that even further, Suzanne de Brunoff, wonderful piece on it, all the way through to a recent book I loved called Portfolio Society, that I think is very inspirational to sort of how I built this, to be frank. As we start talking about how economies sort of work and how they shift and how crypto functions and money functions and currency functions, most of the theory or the books that have sort of helped push me in a different direction are ones that outline specifically the functionality of each piece, and the idea that if we can understand how machines work, we can take them apart and understand how the pieces work and then take those apart. And as you start deconstructing and seeing how these machines function, you can put them together in better ways. And that's, to me, the part that I think was underneath me going in this direction now almost a year and a half ago, when I first started, hey, maybe I should do this thing, and I started messing around. I mean, I have a lot of just general books sort of to recommend in that way, but they're always behind me. If you ever want to see the videos that get posted, or anytime I do a talk, I've got a bunch of books behind me. You can just grab pretty much any of those. There's a lot of really interesting writers who are playing in this direction and giving us room to, I don't know, find ways to do truly new things rather than just doing the same thing everyone else has always done, which leads us in the same direction we've always gone in. As I said in my first talk when we debuted this with Delphi, a lot of the play to earn games, they aren't doing anything new. They're doing the same thing we've seen before. I utilized, and I still do, coconut trees and the coconut trade to talk about how play to earn games ultimately end. They start in a place of, holy shit, everyone gets to make money and everyone's doing well, but they end with people who own the things letting the value of them get crushed into nothing as the people who are playing, the players, let's say the people who actually sit and earn SLP every day, slowly make less and less and less, and everyone else does, as fewer and fewer people own more and more and more, and then at some point it just stops. And we've seen this before. This isn't new. This is part of the business world. This is stuff that's studied in every economics classroom. And so the more that we're able to sort of step away and go, well, wait, what if we don't do the same thing? What if we rethink the things we assume? What if we step back and we do away with some of those cliches? And that's kind of really the thinkers that have sort of pushed me in the best directions. That Gilles Deleuze, who I'm always happy to talk about, Bataille, Georges Bataille is probably number 2. The Accursed Share is one of my favorite books on economics that no one knows. I did the breakdown of how FIFA works in sports, and I ended up coming up with like 9 versions, and I was debating if I should seek more or if I should collapse them. The number 9 is fascinating to me because in a base 10 system, it is the most you can have without rolling over. Technically, 9 is the largest number. It rolls over, it becomes 10, but 9 then becomes 0. And it always repeats. 9 is as large as it gets before it eternally returns to 0. And it does this over and over in every single place, in every decimal place. It can be 99 turns into 100, but both 9s turn into nothing. We just add one more. This, I always just liked that sentiment poetically. And so I was just like, cool, I think I want to keep 9. I wish I had a more profound answer for that. But I just have always liked that poetically. So, no and yes. This is a very difficult question to answer because it's going to depend on what you mean by evolving over time. The NFTs themselves are not shifting or changing. We're very, very set on, generally speaking, what they are or how they're set. Now, as we go and as this becomes a giant platform, will the visuals shift? Will we play with things like that? And there's every reality. We have a lot of room narratively for us to play with things. But underneath it all, the 9 are the center, and everyone sort of comes under them. I also would suggest thinking through as you start looking forward, and seeing more trailers, seeing what else might be there, because 9 may not be it. That's all I'm going to say about that one. So we have decided that each of the 81 does receive 2. Chris, do you want to answer this one? Because you're the one who's actually been handling that algorithm.
Yes. So to answer that, each one is wholly unique, and actually we have no control on the combinations because these are the souls of these immortals, and these souls are highly unique every single time they're created. So it is not a combination of 36 minus 1, it's a combination of the 9. So whenever you come through the coalescent, you are coming back as a combination of the 9. Everybody in Khora is a combination of the 9, and the 81 are the combination of 2 of those original 9 immortals. In the 729, you're a combination of 3. The 4th, you're a combination of 4, and so on. So each one is going to be highly unique and visually unique every single time. That procedural nature that Brooks talked about earlier. If you're the combination of the warrior and the politician, every single time you may see that combination, if there's more than one, they're going to be unique on their own, the way they're generated. So that combination of that aspect is unique, and all the other attributes that go along with it make it even more rare and more unique.
Well put.
I hope that answered the questions.
I hope it did too. Lo-Fi, if you would in Emma ask, just give a thumbs up if that's a good answer. Because I did. It's a complex. It's a complex one, especially with generative art and the way we're doing it. We went through iterations in discussing this because at some point we're going to do a reveal kind of how these were made in the process. It was a lot, but it was one of the debates of, do we do a literal genetic play where it's like, 7 and 2 had a kid and so it's 7-2, and then 7 and 3 had a kid, so it's 7-3. But if those two have a kid, do you do a mix of, and they could be 7-7 genetically, which is one of the reasons sort of chased us away from it. The big deal is that as things extend outwards, and there are other traits that will come in that will sort of exemplify this. I don't want to say you become more corrupted, it's not the right word, but your distance from them increases, and therefore the variability does as well. And that's a big thing we're playing into, not just here, but sort of across the board. As I said, everything we're doing maintains this same narrative. So it's not just the inner circle and outer circle. Our city also has these, is circular. We have everything is this distance from Asila, the distance from the totality, the coalescent, the singular. As you grow distance, your variance increases. And there's a lot of power in being out there. There's a lot of power in being very close. And we want to keep that dynamism very strong, because this is, I could probably, if I were to spend hours talking through the way I look at economics and the way some of the writers I mentioned earlier do, that the power of it is the vitality and dynamism of that an economy dies if everything settles. And so we needed to create effectively this game in the metagame that constantly is pulling and pushing against each other. And there's a lot of things there. The more people outside, they may have slightly less power, but the dynamism is significantly higher, which means they have possibly the power to do some shit that the guys on the inside don't, which conversely though. And so it becomes this back and forth that enables a lot of different things and a lot of very interesting sort of social interactions at large. Well, I actually think there's a very easy way we can do that. We have today, I believe, released our Discover Your Immortality trailer.
The 9. They are the original immortals of Khora. And every citizen carries with them a small part of their souls. Your aspect is a visualization of this spiritual makeup. Which of the 9 do you carry with you? It's proof of your place among Khora's elite. The inner circle. The closer you are to the 9, the more power and influence you'll wield. It's a membership pass to Khora's high society that lets you fully participate in the economy, building on land, sponsoring players and teams, owning certain streaming rights, all are made possible by the Aspect. Discover your immortality. Unleash your power. Reclaim your future. Get your Aspect of the Nine.
Chris, do you have an answer for that?
Yes. The answer would be they will not morph over time. In terms of my understanding of the question is if you own two or more aspects. The answer is no, they're not going to morph and change and create something new as a whole, because the aspect is essentially your immortal soul. This is who your immortal is and their connection to the nine. So those connections are locked. Where nothing's stopping from anybody owning more than one later on, but only one soul can ever be kind of connected to your metagamer account at a time.
Yeah,
so that would be
I
your
think
visual
that's
soul. So that's a great connection between those two.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. It's that there's a non-fungibility that's very intended here, and NFTs have a permanence that we're wanting to follow. And with that, the idea of immortality, I think, runs with it very hard. There isn't going to be like that kind of like birthing some new trait or things like that. This is the way you're set up. If you want to change that, you have to go find another aspect and find a way to get it. The biggest benefit is that they get to go first. Well, technically second. So let's say there is a tournament coming. The tournaments where people can risk it all and die, players of the games, and metagamers are able to purchase tickets, trade players, sponsor players, all kinds of fun things. So this is coming, and so we've announced this, and tickets to that round or tickets for teams show up, and there's like, let's say 1,000 of them. They don't just go out in mass for sale for a ton of reasons, but for us specifically, the nine get to mint first or buy first or take part first. We'll be using this that technically no one is the nine. They are narrative at best. There's no wallet of earning money necessarily. They're narrative sort of actors in the space. But the 81 who follow them get to go second. So they get to, if all 81 were to go out and grab some tickets, that at that point, we would have 90 tickets gone. And then after that, the remaining 910 tickets, the 729 would have first shot. And they would get to go. After that, it's the remaining circles as it goes out. Think of every single activity pulsing from the center outwards. There's going to be a lot of activities. Don't think that it's necessarily everyone in the middle is going to be buying everything before it goes out. And if they do, well, that's something else. That's not a bad sign for us ultimately, but it gives us a chance to, again, have the people who are the most invested quite literally in the space, people who've put up the most money, the people who are the most active, most interested, who are doing these things at these levels, take part in a significant way and set the tone for how things are going to go as it goes forward. It's one of the things that if you pay attention to pretty much any NFT sale, when you do those sort of pre-minting and you have those hyper influencers, which actually a number of you are, those people, once you join one of those and you do it, your interaction in general changes everything after that. And we wanted a way to harden that and make it a thing that people are able to recognize. So they can go, oh, person X is number 73. And they're a combination here. They're taking part in this. I'm excited about that. I follow them. I'm in line with them. I'm part of their group or I'm part of their team. That sort of mentality is baked into the nature of any hierarchical economy. We wanted to make it explicit, and it gives us a chance to, ensure, again, those with the most have the most opportunities to really shape things. So that's the easiest place I'd say for the benefits of the 81. Otherwise, I don't think there are any that are outright stated anywhere. They don't have significant powers over anything else. They have specific affinities, slightly stronger for 2, but they don't have any more than 2 affinities. So there's trade-offs for going with one of them. So I'm not even sure I would say that that's even an advantage at that point. again, we're not making one game, we're making a platform. Think of it as Xbox Live or Steam. And we're making a bunch of games to go around it, and we're making a way for other people to connect to that. That setup, the outer games, the players, it doesn't affect it. There's going to be some probably cosmetic shifts slightly so people can have their colors touch and things like that. But beyond that, in the metagame, the titles are, think of them as hints as to the 9 parts of any sports or large-scale economy, especially sports economy, because that's what we're utilizing. We're using it in a little bit more of a poetic way because we want these characters to have personality. We've got real people that we're bringing out that we're going to be sharing with you. You're going to learn about who have heartbreaking backstories, triumphant backstories, kind of terrifying backstories, and things that drive them and ways that they're going to interact. Everyone in the economy may run into them at one point or another. They'll pop their heads up and do things. This way of us having that sort of in a narrative way through them, we consider to be powerful. The same way that if you take all the team owners and all the teams in the NFL, them versus, the personalities who actually are the voice, the John Maddens, versus the conversely, the people who actually run merchandise groups, the guy who owns Lids, for example, or any of the realtors who actually own the land that is around these. Each of those groups kind of has a person actually at the top, and that we know, and that people in those spaces know. And this gives us a chance to sort of touch in and have these sort of setups tie into everything. It's a big deal to us that we are able to tie everything back narratively. All of this, again, it seems complex as we break it down this way, but when we get into it, we're talking about the 9 parts of any sports economy that each has a leader, and as you join, you're assigned parts of different parts of them. And so which parts of the economy do you think you're going to have most impact on? Well, you get to find out, and you get to take part in your way. And that's kind of the interest of the aspects. Yeah, so it's specifically, we're not doing it genetically. That was the thing I hit on earlier, that we talked about that, and we actually did some explorations in that a while ago. And we decided ultimately we didn't want to touch into that aside from the weird genetic pure blood idea. It does put us in weird spots where suddenly you may have in the 3rd or 4th generation someone who's a pure artist just by the nature of it, of randomness. Instead, very much we're hitting into the 2nd are made of 2, the 3rd are made of 3, the 4th circle is made of 4, and so on as we go out. And so as you start having these sort of different combinations, it is more to denote which circle you're in rather than direct lineage. So we avoid sort of that very awkward conversation and some really shit wording that we really don't want showing up in our chats and our Discord, to be frank. I hope that answered the question. It's not so much that they're a combination of 2, it's that you're all a combination of the 9, determined by the circle you're in. Well, I'm not going to. I'm not.
An easy answer.
That's a very easy answer. What you're talking about is, think of it this way. I could tell you an answer very cleanly and tell you, here's who hates who, here's who's a rival of who, and break it down in a way that is very matter of fact. The challenge with that is it makes it cynical, and it loses a lot of the color of why and actually how these interactions affect utility. Because they do, and they're all going to play into each other. They're going to affect story. And so as we go, the way we're writing and the way we're telling the story, the way we're designing the games, all of these things tie together. So as I reveal everything here about the aspects, as you can hear, there's a reason I haven't talked about some of these things in depth, because they necessarily impinge upon other things that I have to talk about here, and necessarily other things. They imply very quickly. And if you chase down a handful of things, for example, even in the little lines that we released in our teasers alone, you actually will start to be able to figure out who feels what way about who really fast, if you pay attention. But as you get going and as we start revealing and we have larger story beats, we have significant plays that are into just reading about these characters, hearing the stories, seeing them interact. Suddenly you're in a very different place of understanding where you want to put your loyalties, your affiliate, and your affiliation. And I would even go so far as to say where you want to put all your affiliations. Because I think there's some very particular ways that things are going to be working out over the course of this project. If we're able to go on for as long as we think, that I think will drive some pretty fantastic rivalries among subgroups. And subgroups, again, pay attention to the trailer we released today. What I want to talk about is how the 9 interact and how your aspect is a choice of the 9. And how you handle that is you. Again, here's the problem with the idea of the metaverse as it's been corrupted and ruined by a whole bunch of people who don't understand how kind of human activity works. When we sit here and we have you running through the meanings of all of this stuff, and I have you talking about the 9, you're bringing to it yourself. I can tell you a million times, if 1 hates 2 and 2 hates 3 and 3 loves 4 and 7, 8, 9, haha. Like, I can do this. I can tell you what these things are, but that's just me dictating what then you're supposed to feel. I'm not doing that. We aren't doing that. We're actually building a real metaverse. Everyone else is telling you how to feel. They're building a universe, a single space of meaning. You are the unique thing when you come to what we're doing. This is the one thing that makes all this talk about the metaverse and this decentralized idea and NFTs actually interesting. It's the stuff that sucked you in the first place. If you're watching this, and even if you probably aren't, the thing that sucked you in is your ability to actually draw your own meaning and your own passions and your own everything as you move between NFT and project to NFT and project. Fuck each universe. You are the metaverse as you make your way through it. So my job is to give you the most interesting tools. So you could say, oh, well, this rivalry happens, and I've chosen to side with 2. And then someone else goes, well, I side with the other person. We don't see it as a rivalry. Because that is how you get really interesting interactions. The best days of World of Warcraft are fucking long behind, to be frank. You go back to UO, Ultima Online even. The way that guilds interacted across multiple races, multiple spaces, all of this, the meaning was determinant by the players. It was open. UO didn't go out of its way to say, oh, these people are the enemies of these people. WoW did that to a point, but even the underlying story of WoW is that they're corrupted and wrong, like tricked. Like the Horde was tricked. They're all good guys, and there's some bad humans too, and it's a lot more gray area. So it's not even that one side is the one you want to side, but everyone assigned that. Everyone went there. They brought themselves to it. They brought their story. They threaded their own. This is what we want. We want you to tell the story and make it true. I want 1.5 years, 2 years from now for you to shape this. And I mean that in the way that we're not going to tell you who's good or bad. I have beliefs. I have the ones I side with, and I would ruin you. I'm partial to the artist. Granted, I kind of wrote a lot of the backstory, so I'm a sucker for it. But I'm a sucker for the artist. Everyone in the group has attached to 1 or 2 of them. We're kind of in love with these characters ourselves. And it's not even so much that like we identify with them or we believe one's more evil or better, or they're complex and interesting. And so because we assign our own meaning and we go through it, it lets us be attached in a new way. And that's what we want. I want you to tell me why whoever is the misunderstood one or the good one or the bad one, there's none of them are that. Bring yourself, bring what you want to it, and actually be the metaverse. You know, that thing that everyone keeps telling you need to be, or that thing everyone like Mark Zuckerberg is trying to package and sell to you. Turns out you're it, so just do it. You don't have to spend money. You will not be able to pick. And that includes me. Trust me. It is one of the things we debated as well. Can you choose? How do you choose? Do we let people go first? Do we let people go second? I have mine, again, as I said, I have my favorites. I think everyone does at this point, especially in the group. I'm not able to pick. None of us are. The goal is you get the one you get. It doesn't stop you or preclude you from doing any activity. As you do them, you will learn what the affinities mean, how they play out, how they edge you in different directions and give you access to things that help empower you. Think of it as side grades rather than upgrades. The ability for you to specialize. And as you specialize, it is about trading and finding ways to swap, finding ways to buy, finding ways to do these different things to enable these different activities in the overall economy and empower yourself the best. One of the things that's really fun about this weird space, which is crypto, is the communities. And they're a very unique community. I've done community management for a very long time. I ran a community for LucasArts and Lucasfilm as well. And then I did it for Avatar. I've run huge communities and little ones and all sorts of things. I did fan sites for bands. This is a very strange space to be in crypto. And in crypto, which is a strange space, we have a strange community. And I mean it in the best way possible. Most crypto communities are overindulgent, jumping and everyone yelling. We have that, and I love you guys. But there's a weird extra thoughtfulness here, and I do think it's because we haven't done a lot of the things that a lot of other projects do. We've had some very wonderful people at the beginning who went right to a handful of people, used their clout and said, hey, I think this is a good project. And somehow the best people from those communities found their way here. And it's been wonderful. So I want to say thank you.